to try and explain the graph and why I think it's a worthy investment right now. So you may have heard the term blockchain. It's going to be foundational for a lot of future app and software development. One application that I'll use as an example right now is title ownership. So right now when you buy a home or property, you have to spend usually over $1,000 to get a title company to go and like verify that you're the only one that can claim ownership of the property. But with the blockchain, that's something that could be done for like less than a cent. So like people in the Philippines that I used to know lived on unincorporated, unowned land and squatters. And there's no way that they could even like validate that they've lived in the house for 20 years or prove ownership. So if the government wanted to come and kick them out, they had no recourse. So let me start with that example of a title company. There's a few reasons the blockchain is so special versus historic database technologies. And the core thing is that it is immutable, meaning you can't like artificially modify it. And the reason that it occurs is because every block in the blockchain starts with a unique key, and then in the block is data. So this would be like in our title company example, the owner of the property, the price that they paid, and maybe the date that they purchased it on. And then the blockchain has a procedure where it takes the input hash plus the data in the block and it creates a new hash. And then the next block that gets added to this chain starts with the output hash of the previous block. And then it would add the owner, the price, the date, when it gets sold again. And it would run another calculation giving a third hash. So like you can't come back and change something here without it changing this too. And since you know in the next block, the hash represented by the number 2 here, like the way that this calculation works, it means that you can't come back and retrofit this. So it's a really powerful way of proving ownership. And it's why Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are much more popular, because assuming you don't lose your wallet password or something and someone is able to like trick you into giving them money, no one can come back and say, okay, that this is actually owned by this person without it having a cascading effect on all of the subsequent blocks. Because if this 2 changes, then there's a conflict here that the system will spot. And if you change this 2 to a new 2, then this breaks and on down the chain. So I know that's super confusing probably and very high level, but it's kind of one of the core principles of, well, Bitcoin first introduced it, and now Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies are using it as well. So if we live in a world where this title company exists and they're able to easily validate the owner and the price and the date, and you can see this chain of ownership and the price that it sold, it stands to reason that like this is really valuable data if we wanted to create an app for real estate investment. So maybe you want to start buying speculative real estate in the Philippines where it's probably super cheap. You could use this real estate investment app to like check the price trends for a piece of property and know what the title, who the owner is, and how much what they paid previously. So it also adds a lot of transparency to the market, which is nice. So if we were going to go and build this real estate investment app, we want this data that exists in the blockchain. And before the graph existed, whoever the startup people are would have to go and build something that's going to come and look at every single block in the blockchain. and then send that data back to the real estate investment app so that you can show, like if you had a property search functionality, you would want like price history of a property, so price trends. You would probably want like sale frequency, how often does the property come up for sale. Okay, so this data is really helpful if you were to build this app, but the cost of building something that's going to be able to go and look at every single block here is really quite high. And a lot of investors are not going to, or startup people are not going to want to go and learn how to get this data out of the blockchain. So it's very expensive. So what the graph does, I'll just draw that graph here in the middle. Their logo looks something like this. If you find it in Coinbase, which is what I would recommend. So the graph essentially acts as a marketplace for data access. So there are people that work within this graph network who are going to essentially go and do the work of building out the connection to the blockchain themselves. And there's some kind of complex economic motivation there that I won't get into, but these people are called indexers. And they're not employees of Edge and Node, the company that I'm working for. These are like independent contractors that just work within this graph marketplace. So the indexers go and get all of this data and then package it up nicely in their own databases. So they like are able to kind of get this data out, and now we have like title data, right? And then they offer the access to this nice database for a price to, so we have app developers up here, right? So these app developers want that title information. So they're going to come through the graph network and they're going to pay using GRT, which is the graph token, the thing that I'm encouraging everyone to invest in. They'll pay in GRT to access this database, and then they can pull that data up in and use it in their property search details. So essentially the graph facilitates this marketplace of you have consumers, app developers that want data, and then you have data providers who do the hard work of actually going through the blockchain and pulling out the owner and the price and the date, and then charging access to that data to the app developers. And for one data source, it definitely increases the efficiency of this app dev and helps this real estate investment app happen more quickly. But it becomes very powerful when you start to introduce other data sources. So like maybe as we think about the future of real estate investment, you want to think about climate details, right? And how that's impacting price, because there are probably places in the world that get more expensive and cheaper as a result of climate change. But this original blockchain source that we wanted to look at has no climate detail. It would have the property details, but nothing on the climate. So you could imagine that there's a weather blockchain source as well that's going to have temperature by location, trends, etc., right? And that's going to be written over time. So you can see, like, I don't know, maybe every day or every hour, it would like document what the temperature was in that location. So you could have another indexer who is really essentially selling access to the temperature data. So they've built this temperature data set, right? And now they're going to go into the GRT market and they're going to offer it for sale and say, hey, for this amount of GRT, and usually it's like less than a cent, you can use the GRT network to pay me once again, if I was this indexer, in GRT to access temperature data. and then you can put that temperature data up into your real estate investment application. So this app developer is essentially taking some massive shortcuts. They didn't have to do the search and get all of the data out of the title real estate blockchain. They didn't have to do all the work to get it out of the weather blockchain. Instead, they're going to this graph marketplace and finding indexers who have already done the hard work, and then offering them payment in GRT for access to the data. So this is already happening today. I think there's like 4 billion of these like calls through the graph network to a data source. So these indexers are already making money doing indexing and getting the data and selling it to the applications that use it. And over time, like you could think that instead of just a real estate investment app, there becomes numerous other apps that are all transacting through the graph network to get access to data. And the more people there are using the graph network, the more valuable the currency becomes because of supply and demand. Like right now, there is about 1.2 billion GRT in circulation, but by the end of this year, I think there'll be 10 billion. And that's a pretty fixed number. It does increase a little bit over time, and some of it gets burnt. You don't really need to worry about that. But essentially, it's a pretty fixed supply. So right now, the price of GRT is about $1, which is, in my opinion, quite low. I think there's a lot of potential that as all of these applications start to use the network benefits of the GRT marketplace, then the value of GRT goes up significantly. And it attracts more indexers. So they're competing on price. So maybe someone else comes and indexes the title company and gives a cheaper rate. So the app developers start using this indexer. So it's a really, I think the economics of it are really, really cool. But in summary, this is potentially hugely valuable for the future of the internet and finance. And I could see really massive potential. And of course, like, I don't have a crystal ball. There could be ups and downs, and maybe there's a great competitor that comes into the marketplace and destroys the graph. But I think they've got a good head start. There's no other competition in the market yet. And I think that because the GRT tokens have only been available since December 2020, they're still undervalued and a good opportunity to invest now. So if you have questions, happy to try and answer them. I'm still learning a lot of the space, but yeah, happy to share more about why I think now is a good time to invest. And I would just add again that I won't benefit, like my company doesn't benefit from you investing. You're investing in a marketplace that has a currency for accessing data. The company that I work for will continue to build tools to try and encourage more growth in the graph network, but it's not like you're investing in the company I'm working for. You're investing in this marketplace, and the growth upside is when a lot more people are using it, GRT value goes up because there's a pretty fixed supply.